This is a unique part of the cemetery. It's one of the oldest. It was started in early 1864 when these 13 men were laid here. Originally, they were laid here with wooden boards with their name and rank carved into them by friends. And eventually, this unit, the 79th New York, put men on detail that were professional stonecutters to stay in East Tennessee and carve special stones and a monument here in the center for the 13 men that they left here in East Tennessee. And we have an interesting and unique American story. There's a subtle irony in that we're portraying these American soldiers but wearing plaid pants, and they had a bagpiper here in East Tennessee. Most of these men were born in Scotland, but they were immigrants to New York City. It's one of the closest ports at that time in the 1850s. But they had volunteered their service when Abraham Lincoln called for 75,000 men in the spring of 1861. These men specifically, though not all died in battle, died here in East Tennessee. And I have a letter here. It says, Headquarters, 79th Regiment, Strawberry Plains, East Tennessee, January 1863. Mr. Thomas Sinclair, dear sir, your letter of the 17th is in my hands. Sergeant Robert Atherley of Company G was killed at Fort Sanders in the attack on the fort of the 29th November last, and he's buried in the cemetery at Knoxville. His body can be procured by his friends or family if they desire. Sergeant Atherley was a faithful and brave soldier and had the respect of every member of my regiment. He fell in the discharge of his duty, and his loss is deeply lamented by the comrades he had in the 79th, and the regiment loses, through him, another of its best and bravest men. He was shot in the head and died about 12 hours after it occurred during the battle. My deepest condolences with his family and you in your bereavement. I am respectfully yours, David Morrison, Colonel Commanding 79th Regiment. Mr. Atherley is still buried here. His friends and family did not come and get his body, much like Mr. Laughlin Mackenzie. Now I can't remember exactly which one Laughlin is, but the obituary in the New York Times that notified people in New York of his death simply read, at Knoxville, Tennessee, on Wednesday, Laughlin Mackenzie died of chronic diarrhea at Army Hospital No. 5. He was of Company F, 79th Regiment, Highland Guard, aged 25 years. The following is an extract in a letter received by his family of the chaplain of the regiment. Quote, while in health, he was ever faithful in the performance of his duty as a soldier, adorning his profession by a courteous and steady deportment. He was respected accordingly by the officers and men. In the hospital, his patience and cheerfulness endeared him to his nurses and fellow sufferers. Laughlin had a soldier's funeral in the cemetery at Knoxville, and lies in a spot where many an eager eye who yearn in years to come will read the wooden slab which may in time decay. Of course, the wooden slab was replaced. A few years ago, while we were doing this very ceremony, an old woman came up to me and said that she was related to one of the fellows buried here, Mr. Laughlin Mackenzie. And this is a copy of the image that she had. Shane, if you want to, well, I could just pass it around. But he's a young man, like I said, died at 25 years old.
This is the copy.
Yeah, it's a copy. But Mr. Laughlin Mackenzie, like the other 13, they were not disinterred and reburied in their adopted state of New York. Many, like other Civil War soldiers here, there's a Medal of Honor recipient, Mr. Spillane from the Huntsville, Pennsylvania. But on a human interest level, Laughlin Mackenzie was one of 4 brothers that served in the 79th in the same company. His brother Roderick was shot in the throat at Fort Sanders. He survived, barely. He spent 18 months going through the U.S. Army medical system, which at that time was not the best in the world, not very modern. But he did survive. And the three of his brothers later posed in 1866 with their company commander in all of their fine kilts and Scottish regalia back in New York City. One last thing I'd like to read here is from a Mr. McBride, who's also here. His obituary in the New York Times was fairly short. It says, McBride, deceased, in the hospital at Knoxville, Tennessee on the 14th of chronic diarrhea. Robert McBride of Company F, 79th Regiment Highlanders, age 24 years old, 10 days, a native of Irving, Scotland. And that's it. That's his last send-off to the world. But keep in mind that all of these men, though Scottish, and we have it on the muster rolls, they're born all over Scotland in the places I can't even pronounce. They adopted the flag of the United States. They fought under the national banner at that time with 33 stars, and hundreds of them gave the last full measure, as Abraham Lincoln said, for their adopted country. And I think that is truly an American story to tell. If anyone has any questions afterwards or wants to come and talk, we know a little bit of other Civil War history, general East Tennessee stuff, and what we don't know, I'm sure I can make a little bit of it up. But again, thank you for being here. We're going to lay some thistles here on the grave, so please be patient with us and enjoy a little bit